Good morning, good day, and good evening. As you know, as we always say, it does not really matter what time, day, night, or evening that you listen to Amalinda Baptist podcast. You are now live with your favorite host, which is Randy, and I am with my co-host, your favorite pastor, Pastor Donovan. Hello.
Hey Randy, how's it going?
I am well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I can see that, all white.
Yeah, doing some white today. It's hot here in East London.
Yeah, it's very hot. I won't lie, it's very hot. I was not dressed this way, honestly speaking. I was dressed very differently until I stepped outside. I was like, it is hot. Had to change my whole outfit. If I knew how hot it was, I probably would have been dressed in white too.
White was a good choice for today.
Definitely a great choice because I am very hot even right now. But anyway, speaking of hot, so didn't see, but I heard you and your wife were up on stage.
Yes, co-preaching. That's the first time we've ever co-preached together.
Really?
Yeah, first time. So we've obviously done like some stuff on stage and spoken together. But first time we've actually taken a message together. And she's a great communicator, very, very natural, and comes across very nice and warm.
I would have believed you if you weren't scratching your eyebrows right now when
if
you
I
were
wasn't
saying that. Yeah.
No, I'm being honest. She's good. She's really good. Very natural. Was a lot of fun, and she's very like my wife has a nice cheekiness. So, like sass. So it's quite fun. It's quite fun in stage. So you get some people who are like quite serious. In church,
like
church is like serious. No, I'm not serious all the time. So it was a little bit different for some people, but we got really good feedback. So it was a lot of fun.
Did they at least get her jokes? Because I know she likes making jokes and laughing all the time.
She does. There was a part in the message where Annabelle spoke about hair, where she was
I remember that part.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know if you could hear it in the recording, but people were laughing. Like the ladies were like identifying.
You hear
with
laughing, but you can't obviously hear the full scope of it. So it was.
Yeah, they laughed so much at that.
This is why visuals are very important. We need to go visual soon.
Yeah, if we could get a camera, that's one of the things I'm believing God for, is to get a good camera, and we could even record these podcasts with a better camera. Would be great.
Yeah, that would be great.
Better lighting.
Yeah.
So, look, if you feel like God is speaking to you, that would be great. That would be great.
I won't say anything about that, okay? But I am trusting God for better equipment, yeah. God's going to come through, man. God's going to come through. So, what would you say was the highlight of Sunday's message since you were co-preaching?
Yeah, I think if I would take out one thing that I felt was really important in that message is the part on singleness. Because I think we don't speak, like in church, we don't speak a lot about singleness.
Yeah,
singleness.
About
it's always like, okay, and there's
marriage.
Yeah, and there's like married couple, like there's marriage seminars and there's marriage courses, pre-marriage courses, and whenever churches have tried to do anything for single people, it's always come across a bit cringe, it'll be like the singles club. And then it's so awkward. Like everyone's like, I don't want to go to that. Like, I don't know when you were single, if you ever went to any of those, like they were so awkward. But so singleness is not really spoken about a lot in church. And I think for a lot of people, that's a big season of your life. Especially nowadays, people are getting married later and later. Yeah. You got married when you were 30, 29?
31.
31?
31.
31? Yeah, I got married when I was 30. So, in the past, people get married when they're 21, 22.
Facts.
Yeah, so people are getting married a lot later, which means they're single for a lot longer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of space there to make really poor decisions. And I think one of the things we spoke about on Sunday is sometimes we think that those decisions don't impact your marriage one day. And so you think to yourself, like, because that's what happens in the movies, like, and series, like, they date, they sleep around, they do whatever but then when they find Mr. Right or Mrs. Right or whatever, then everything is just magical and it's all good from there. But the reality is, you carry
There's
your
consequences.
past. Yes, you carry that baggage into your relationship, and so if you do it wrong, it's really gonna make your marriage so much more difficult.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that matter, but that's a story for another time. Um, there's something that I want to ask, right? Considering that it was your first time co-preaching, what criticism would you have regarding the message?
What criticism would I have of my
What
own?
what would you have loved
Done.
to change?
I think I think we could have maybe flowed a little bit better. Some of it, we can naturally read fairly well off each other, but I think if we could do it a little bit more, we can flow a little bit better off each other. Some of the setup, I think we could have done a little bit better as well. It would have been great if we had 2 cordless mics, because we had like 1 corded mic, and that was a little bit awkward.
Wait, you were showing a corded mic.
Annabelle had a corded mic. She
Okay.
spoke. So if you have 2, at least that makes it a little bit better. From the message itself, I think, I haven't really had time to really go through it and think critically on what stuff. But if I think maybe also I think we could have maybe landed a little bit differently. We landed a little bit in marriage, but I maybe we could have just made it a little bit more practical for people. Like, here are some practical things for you to do.
Okay.
Because we spoke about marriage, we spoke about invest in your marriage.
Yeah.
Marriage is one of
I
those
remember
things.
that part,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's really important, but it's never urgent. When it becomes urgent, it's usually too late. And that's a really, I don't know where I heard that. I think it was Craig Rochelle who taught that the first time I heard that. And it's such an important thing.
Yeah.
Important things are often not urgent, but if you neglect it, it comes at such a big cost.
Wow. Man, I really wish I was here on Sunday. Because if this is how you're speaking right now, I can imagine how Sunday was. But anyways, I didn't get a chance to listen to everything, obviously. But I did get a lot of nuggets within the recording, which you sent me. And one thing that I loved about your guys' conversations was the fact that you were able to joke about serious stuff, things that couples actually fight about, but you were actually able to joke about. Like, for instance, there was a conversation about how when you first dating, you're all in love, yada yada, and then you were speaking about how did you say the chemistry fades or something of that manner?
Yeah.
Where you say the chemistry fades, and then Annabelle was like, yeah, he's right. The chemistry does fade, because normally when you all lovey-dovey, you want to do everything for him.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, when the chemistry's gone, now the fact that he just leaves the dishes there annoys you. I love that.
It's relatable, right?
It's very relatable.
It's really relatable.
Very relatable. Because I obviously placed it within my own marriage. I was like, when me and my wife were very,
in the beginning of the relationship, and there's
everything was,
she's
and then
perfect.
Now
She doesn't
I'm
have any flaws.
How did I miss all this? I'm like, how did I miss all this? My wife is hilarious, man. My wife is hilarious. My wife will walk inside the house and she'll put her bag here, put a jacket over there, and then take off her shoes there and take her slippers, and then go sit by the lounge area, and then still leave those slippers over there. And then it's chaotic within 5 minutes that she's home. And then
your OCD is
and it's like a ticking time bomb. Okay, I'll be looking at her babe, could you please? And then, yeah, babe, I'll do it. Once my wife says, yeah, babe, I'll do it, I know she's not going to do it. Because the only time my wife does something is if she does it right then and there. If she says she's going to do it, she's not going to do it. And then I have to like coach myself, like, do not lose yourself, do not lose yourself. And then like I was thinking while listening to the recording, how on earth do we always miss the things that we look at like as a red flag, right? Like for instance, me being OCD and her being the way she is. I don't want to call her untidy on the microphone, but my wife
But
being
you just did, but okay.
I didn't
Actually say it, but
said I
heavily
don't want to do
implied,
it.
yeah.
I didn't want to do it, but but I started thinking like, how do we allow such things to just happen? And then when the chemistry fades, then everything is like right there in your face, like, and then you start thinking the person changed, but a lot of the person didn't
Person
change. You were just
didn't change, yeah.
ignoring everything,
Yeah.
which is something we actually need to start speaking about. Like when you're building a relationship with someone, like look at everything that they do, because
Yeah.
the chemistry is gonna fade, and those things that you ignoring, they're gonna annoy you like
Yeah.
100 times worse. And I'm a very patient person, so I can control myself for the most part, and so I find ways to help my wife help around the house so that I don't strangle her. So what I do is I do something that she doesn't like, and
Yeah.
then I say, if you want me to do this, then you're gonna have to do this. And then she'll be like, okay, babe. Then we find compromising ways to
Right.
like help each other out. But obviously, each to his own. I wouldn't advise you to do that to your spouse, because we don't know what your spouse's
Yeah, sometimes those things
wavelengths.
don't work. What I would say on that is this is where like having a really good pre-marriage counseling comes in,
Yes.
because so often like my wife and I have done like a number of pre-marriage counseling sessions.
Yes, you did
counseled-
speak about that.
Yeah, we've counseled a number of couples. In fact, there was a couple that came on Sunday
Yeah.
to church. We did their pre-marriage counseling. We married them. They're still married, so I feel like we've done a good job. So, but so many people, they just believe, okay, the chemistry, we're going to be fine. We love each other. We don't need counseling, and even like. Sometimes counseling costs some money to see either like a therapist, or sometimes some churches they would charge to do some courses, stuff like that. And then people go like, no, we can't afford that. But what frustrates as a pastor, when I speak to other pastors, like this is our frustration, is that people would then spend like 50,000 rand on a wedding
for the party.
and then they'll be like, we're not going to spend 500 rand or 1,000 rand on pre-marriage counseling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, that party is over like this.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's still going to be Auntie Susan that's going to complain the chicken was too dry. And another person's going to complain the music was too loud.
Yeah.
And people aren't going to be happy. So cut down on that. Invest in your relationship.
Amen to that.
Because when you have those really good conversations, and if you have a good person that takes you through that journey, you're speaking about, okay, what's your expectation? Who cleans? Who does the dishes? Who cooks? And so in the beginning of the series, I showed a video. It was taken from North Point Church. They did a series, Andy Sandy did a series on what happy couples know. It's a brilliant message series. And it's a video of two people getting married. And as they're getting married, they play like their thoughts. And it's so funny because they're both thinking exactly the opposite things. The guy's like, I'm never going to have to cook again. My wife is always going to cook for me. And the wife is thinking, we'll get takeaways all the time. It'll be
This
so
is not
great.
in the 80s, bro.
There's all of these things where they have this expectation, I have this expectation.
Yeah.
And because you never really have those hard conversations, when you get married, suddenly you're like, oh, but I thought you were going to do that. Oh, I assumed you were going to, I was going to. And you can avoid all of that stuff by having really good conversations beforehand.
Which is another very important part of that, is that do not compare your marriage to someone else's marriage.
So good.
If Annabelle cooks for Pastor Donovan, I cannot expect Evelyn to cook all the time for me.
Right.
What works in his household may not work in mine. First of all, you need to consider time. You have to consider who is more present in terms of home. There's a lot of things to take into consideration. Who has more physical
Abilities, like who can cook better?
no, we'll get to that, but more of the who's more tired or who has
Right.
more energy to do something. Because I'm trying to like compare, because you're a pastor and she's what's it?
Psychologist. or studying
Psychologist,
to be a
yes.
psychologist, yeah.
These are two different fields, right? One is, I would say, is more taxing because she has to sit and listen to people's problems, which is very mind-boggling. And then Pastor Donovan is his tired is different from hers because
Yeah.
she's more tired mentally, but he's probably more tired physically. But when it comes to now, they both come home. Let's say 5 p.m. You both come home, and then now the question is who's gonna cook because you're both coming home. Now you're gonna have the conversation. Hey, babe, you know what? My day wasn't as taxing as whatever day, so I'll cook today. Then tomorrow she'll say, you know what, my clients weren't as, so I'll cook today.
Yeah.
Now you can't take that argument that they have in their household and try and place it on your spouse and say, hey,
Right.
look, she's cooking. No, look, he's cooking. No, you have to make work what works for your household. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, I work from home, so I'm more versatile. I can cook more than my wife. But when my wife is off, she'll be the one to handle those types of responsibilities so that I can focus on the things that I need to do more time efficiently. Because when my wife is at work, I have to do a lot of things, which include my daughter. So I'm not as active in the things that I want to do because she's at work. But the minute she's off, that's when, like, relax mode, now I can focus on everything that I need to do, so
Yeah.
that by the time that she has to go back to work, I'm ahead with my work so that she doesn't have to do anything when she
Right.
comes back from work. So it's just a matter of respecting each other, like understanding, okay,
Yeah.
this is your structure and this is my structure. Let's meet each other halfway.
Yeah.
Do not force things that do not work in your household just because they work in someone else's
Yeah.
household.
And to add to that, like that's where we spoke about, like, it's a submission competition.
Yeah.
I want to serve my wife wants to serve me, and if we serve each other, it's not about me trying to get my way.
Yeah.
It's about how can I serve and set my wife up for a
household.
win. The other thing that we have to speak about comparison is the danger of comparing to your family, i.e., like, this worked for my parents, therefore it should work in my house.
No.
Or the alternative of that is it worked really badly in my parents' house, therefore I'm going to do the exact opposite in my house. And so sometimes what people can do in marriage is they can overcorrect.
Yeah.
So they can go like, okay, my father was really absent. Like, he wasn't really involved. This is not my father. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. But, like, someone could say, my dad was really absent, wasn't involved. Now I want to be involved in everything. I want to cook and I want to clean and sometimes some of those things are unhealthy because you'll just burn yourself out.
Yep.
Like, learn to rest as well. Learn for your wife to serve you and you serve your wife. And or on the other side, like, the dad is abusive. And so you say, like, okay, I'm going to be the exact opposite of my dad. But because you never deal with the resentment, we spoke about that last week.
Yeah.
Because you never forgive and deal with that resentment, it means that what happens is you end up doing that same kind of thing. You either put a distance or you push away, or whatever the case might be, but it just ends up in an unhealthy place.
Amen to that. That is true. That is true. Now, the question that I have regarding this conversation, when it comes to compromise, what is the limit? What would be our threshold regarding compromise? Because there is something as compromising too much, or where someone compromises 70%, the other person only compromises like 30%, where it ends up being like a strain on you,
Yeah.
because like you carrying the relationship now. Now, what advice would you give to because there's always someone who loves more, who always wants to express their love more than the other person, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, but there is that unhealthy balance where someone enjoys it a little too much and says, you know what, because this is so good,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay here.
Yeah. So do you mean like if we're saying, okay, we submit to each other, we serve each other, but there's one person who kind of takes advantage of that and like, okay, I'm just gonna be served, and
even though it's not intentional, but it's just them being comfortable with the fact that life is easy and good for them. They're not thinking about their partner.
Yeah. Look, I think really what needs to happen in those circumstances is you need to have conversations in the front end of the issues.
Okay.
So I think like if you're the partner who's been not abused, that's the wrong word, but like
taken advantage of,
like maybe you feel like you've been taken advantage of. What usually happens in those situations is the person who feels like they've been taken advantage of, the personality that usually goes with that is like a people-pleasing kind of personality.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want to serve you and I just want to help you, and so you avoid conflict.
Yeah. We call those simps.
Yeah. So when you do that, you got to know this. Conflict in a relationship is healthy. In any relationship. Where there is no conflict, it's an unhealthy relationship.
Okay.
So think, let's go, before we go marriage, let's go workplace.
Okay.
In a workplace environment, when I mean conflict, I mean healthy conflict.
Conflict.
Okay, we can debate this, we can have.
Yeah.
Why? Because if I am passionate about something and you're passionate about something,
we're going to butt heads.
we're going to butt heads at some point. You're going to say, I feel like we should do it that way. And I'm going to say, no, I feel like we should do it this way. The moment you start to become passive about it, that's a pretty negative moment.
Yeah.
When you have a staff worker who's like, oh, all right, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. What is he doing? He's not engaging. He's not bringing his best. He's not thinking, okay, what's the best way? He's just like, okay, I'm not even going to argue.
For the sake of, I'll just do it, but I'm not going to give it my all.
But I'm not going to give it my all.
Yeah.
Because why? Because you took out the option of having healthy conflict.
Yeah.
Because you've taught him or her, listen, if you have healthy conflict, it's always going to be my way.
Yeah.
And when leaders do that, where they go, it's only my way, that never leads to a healthy organization. So actually, there's a book, it's really interesting. What's it called? Dysfunctions of a Healthy Team. Patrick Lencioni, he writes this. And he writes, one of the core things for a healthy team is they have to have conflict. If they don't have conflict, that team is always not gonna be able to function at its full capacity. So in marriage, there needs to be healthy conflict. If your wife becomes passive and is like, oh honey, you do whatever you want, that's a dangerous sign. Like, especially for our wives. If our wives become quiet, we know there's something wrong. And my wife can maybe hear me, so I should be careful
she
what I
needs
say.
to hear this.
Yeah. But if my wife is quiet and
something's definitely wrong.
there's something wrong. Because there needs to be conflict. So for people, when they feel, to get back to your question, and we went like a very long way around, I'm sorry, but to get back to the question, when someone is feel like they're taken advantage of, you have to have that conflict early on. Why? Because if you leave it for later, resentment builds more and more and more. So you got to do it early and do it have it a bit uncomfortable and say, listen, we're going to have a conversation now. And there's healthy ways of doing it. Tell your partner beforehand, hey, we're going to have a conversation. Can we speak about something? Don't just... Because what happens is you leave it, and then suddenly...
And then you yell it out.
You yell it out because you've built up all this resentment and anger. You have to do it early where you can have a good, healthy conversation around it.
I agree with you. I agree. I'm a firm believer of, if something happens now, best deal with it now. Unless the environment is not calling for it, and then obviously you wait till you're alone in private. But I always believe that it is important to always deal with things as they happen, because the more you let it linger, your mind is replaying that, and it gets bigger and bigger every time you replay it.
Yes,
now
it gets exaggerated.
you exaggerate it more and more and more and more. Same thing as because you were speaking about the workplace, right? You know how something can be a problem for us, and then Sven is, let's say, our boss, right? And instead of us speaking directly to Sven about the boss, we talk about it.
Yes.
We have a full-blown venting session about it, and then more people find out about
Right.
it. By the time it gets to Sven, it gets to
It's
be
a
a
huge
big
problem.
thing
Yeah.
compared to what it was when it started out. Which is why it's very important for discuss things as they happen with the right person. Never
Yes.
ever with an outside force,
Yes.
unless you ask him for advice. And that person you're asking for advice from has to be someone that's discreet, someone who's not going to share that information with anyone.
Right.
Because as soon as things get out, it's going to appear way bigger than what
Yeah.
it actually is.
And there's two things that, I mean, what you're saying is so true, because like we've seen that in the work environment, where like, you know, there's spaces where you're frustrated with something, but instead of speaking to your leader, you speak to, and you got to avoid that. I would say this: if you're leading an organization or you're leading a place, a team or
Even
whatever,
in church,
even in
like-
church, whatever the case might be, you've got to ask yourself this question: why are people not speaking to me? Because you got to be thinking, okay, is there a reason why people aren't coming to me with their issues? And then you think, how have I handled it in the past? When people have come to me and said, oh, but what if we did it like this? Was I listening? Did I actually hear?
Am I approachable?
Am I approachable? Am I willing to make some adjustments? Can I go, okay, maybe this is not the perfect way, the exact way I wanted to do it, but maybe let's adjust so I can bring more people in. Like, that's healthy leadership, because now you're bringing people in instead of people just, oh, the boss said it, now we're going to do it. And then you end up just gossiping
Having a
about
lot
it.
of venting around the workplace. Yeah, that's very toxic. But yeah, marriage is the same thing, man. Like, most people like talk about the issues in marriage outside of marriage. Like the wife will go with the girlfriends, the guy will go to his friends, and they'll explain everything while making themselves the victim.
Right. It's always
And
someone
then-
else's
yeah.
fault. Yeah,
And
it's
then
my wife's
now
fault.
the friends, when they come towards the spouse, they have that in mind, like, oh, you did that.
Yeah.
No, you walk around your own house like, I'm sorry, why do y'all have attitude in my house? Just because your spouse spoke to them about something that had nothing to do with them in the first place. And obviously they explain it in their own manner. Instead of coming to you directly and say, hey, babe, you know that thing A, B, and C, I didn't really like it, or I don't agree with it, or whatever the case may be. Let's talk it out. You'd rather go speak to someone that's not even at home
Yeah.
and talk to them, leaving the person you have a problem with, and now it's gonna end up being a bigger thing than what it actually
So
is.
true. But and where do we learn that? We learn that in media, because where do you see that happening? You see that happening on TV. Like, that happens in series all the time, where like the two
Yeah.
people fight, and then what do? They go
They
tell their
leave.
friends. They go tell, this one tells their friends. That's how you deal with conflict. You separate and you go, and that's such an unhealthy way of dealing with it.
Very unhealthy.
For my wife and I, we've never operated like that. Like, if I have an issue, I'm going to speak to her. I'm not going to speak to someone about her unless, you know, there's really advice that I need. But I don't think there's ever been a time where we've had a serious conflict that I've gone to someone else and said, okay, give me advice. Because I'd rather work this out with my wife, and we'll go to, you know, when we're going through a difficult time, we'll go see someone together and we'll journey together on that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. Has there been a time where you guys couldn't agree on something and you needed a third voice to be the voice of reason to say, okay,
There wasn't a specific time that we couldn't agree on something. There was stuff in our lives that we needed to process.
yeah,
So about 2 years ago, there was a stage in our lives where we lost a child, where my wife was pregnant, and we lost our child. And for that, we dealt with it together. We went to counseling together. We spoke to people. So we processed that together. And then also, like, a little bit separately, like, she had her way of processing it, I had my way of processing, but then we also processed it together. So there wasn't like a conflict we had to go through. There were seasons where stuff like that happened, where it's traumatic for both of us. And what's really important when you have those traumatic times, because so often when a couple loses a child, when there's those kind of things that happen, actually that can tear a couple apart.
Yeah.
So you have to be so intentional. Even for us, when that happened to us with the baby, we were like, okay, we have to be intentional about working this out together. We're not going to separate and go our own ways. We're going to face the storm together. Otherwise, this can push us apart.
Yeah. I think you're right about that part. Because one of my biggest fears was actually losing a child, right? And I remember my wife and I had this conversation, and I had no idea she also had the same fear. And then she explained to me her fear. And then the one thing that we highlighted was the grieving process, right? Because my wife grieves very differently.
Right.
She gets over things very quickly. And me, now I'm different.
Takes time to process?
It takes time to process. Because when it happens, I'm not going to like, okay, accept it, this happened. To me, it's like, okay, what just happened?
Yeah.
And then after everything's done, that's when everything will actually unravel, like, okay, this thing happened. So my fear was, because we were talking about when we actually have kids, right? And my fear was that I was venting to her, well, not venting, but
sharing.
Yes, sharing. That I was afraid that if we ever got to that situation where we ended up losing a child, that I wouldn't be able to grieve with her.
Yeah.
Because I'd be pretty much closed off, because I don't like being too vulnerable, because I don't know, man. It feels like someone's going to take advantage of me. So I always like hide myself when I'm, in the vulnerable spot. But I always told her, like, if something of that nature should happen, even if it's not our child, even if it's someone like close to me and someone passes away, like, just try and reach out to me. Don't allow me to be closed off. I had to have that conversation with her.
Because then you got to be intentional about it, because it's a highly, like, to lose a child is a highly traumatic event.
Yeah.
And there was a stage, man, before that happened to us, there was a stage where I was praying with some people in church. We did like an altar call where people came forward, and I had 2 or 3 couples who told me they were pregnant and lost their child. So it happens a lot, but that doesn't make it better. It's a really difficult thing. So you have to be intentional. Like, okay, we are going to process this well together. Otherwise, it can separate. And you go, and what you say is true. Like, you process differently. For my wife and I, we process differently on how we went through that. But, you give each other space, but you also bring each other in. And you have to be saying, like, okay, how are you doing? How are you coping? That's really important.
Yeah. Because surprisingly, we actually went through this ordeal last year. No, was it last year? I think it was the year before. No, it was last year. One of our closest friends actually lost a child. So when it happened, it affected me physically. That's when, like, I had to, like, confess with her, like, why it was actually causing me so much harm. Because I would wake up in the middle of the night struggling to breathe and stuff like that, because I couldn't process what happened to them. And then I had to confess to my wife, like, this stems from my own fears. It's a trigger. So having it hit to someone that was close to me, it really affected me, because, like, that's my brother, man. Like, I love him, and for him to go through that, it was not easy. So as soon as it happened, like, it affected me physically, and then I had to confess to my wife. But then it helped us grow stronger.
Yeah.
Because how they handled everything, like, increased my faith too. Because their son passed away on a Friday, but on Sunday they were still at church. You know? And throughout that whole grieving process, they handled themselves very gracefully, and they said a lot of stuff which, like, made me cast away my own fears. about losing a child that I was like, you know what, God is still God. Because I don't know, man. If it had happened to me and not them, I would have probably not been here today in terms of sitting here.
Yeah.
I would have been a different person. But it had to happen to them for me to lose my fear. Because even he said that. He said, listen, this happened so that you can get over your fear. Because obviously I came to him and explained everything to him because he knew about my fear. And he said clearly that God wanted to
God can use that.
use
Yeah.
our situation to help you. And for that reason, I just want to inspire everyone who has that fear. Talk about it. Don't lock yourself
Yeah.
away with your fears because it will help you. The biggest issue with me, because I'm such a closed book, that my pain I keep to myself. But me actually being able to be open about it is what helped me get through it. So I would advise you guys to talk to someone. It doesn't have to be a pastor, it doesn't have to be a parent, it doesn't have to be whoever. It just has to be someone who's willing to listen.
And someone who's wise. Let me just say that.
Yeah.
Don't go to someone who's going to give you bad
Dismiss
advice.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or be like, oh, just
Get over it.
have some drinks, you'll be fine. You know, that's like the other thing I'll just say on this is that being vulnerability leads to intimacy. So when you're vulnerable with someone, it leads to being intimate. Like in a marriage, when you're open and vulnerable with your wife or your husband, that leads to you guys just getting closer. So like when you're sharing that and you're saying, well, you know, I spoke to my wife about this, what that just helps is that just brings you guys closer together. And
It definitely.
yeah, and sometimes I think we think, okay, you know, I'm scared to do that and take that step, but you know, when you're in that safe space in a healthy relationship, that's the person you need to be vulnerable with.
True. Anyways, I'm trying not be too emotional about this because we clearly went a different route, but
That's okay. I think it was a good conversation. So
it was. But now my mind is focused on that, and excuse me. Sunday, yes. What are you going to be speaking about this Sunday?
honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm going to speak
That's
about.
interesting.
I still have some thoughts.
Are we still on the series, Mark?
Yeah. So we'll still do modern love. I think I want to might speak a little bit about trust. I want to speak maybe a little bit about communication.
Okay.
I think that's a big thing.
I wish I can be in.
Yeah, I think sometimes you hear this, but I said this, and so how to have really good communication. I think that's really important.
Very
So I think I might go with that. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that one because I have a lot of questions regarding that one. Not because of specifically romantic relationships or anything like that, but just in general, I think people misinterpret the concept of communication because everybody thinks communication is one-sided.
Yeah.
And understanding is actually part of communication.
Both
So
ways. Yeah.
it doesn't help if you say let's communicate if you're not willing to listen and understand.
Yeah.
But anyways, what are your final words before we?
Yeah, I think just, the conversation went really interesting tonight. Look, I think one of the things that really helped my wife and I when we went through this, there's one line that we always hold on to, and it's this: when you don't understand the hand of God, trust the heart of God. Like when you don't understand the hand of God, i.e., when you don't understand why things are happening. And the thing that you just need to make peace with in life is that there's some stuff you'll just never know why. Don't get stuck on that question. God, why? Why did this happen? Why? Don't get stuck there. When you're in a place where you're like, I don't understand why, just trust. Okay, I don't understand why, but I know God is faithful, He is good, and I can put my trust in Him.
Amen to that. Which actually reminds me of what my friend said. He said when he went through what he went through, he wanted to ask himself why him, and then obviously he God calmed him down and he understood, if not him, then who? Because that, whatever you think is bad that's happening to you, who deserves to go through that? No one.
Right.
But obviously, you have to just focus on what's ahead. And at the end of the day, we tend to lose all focused when, as you can see on this table, there are different elements on here. And we look at this as the bigger blessing, and that is a smaller blessing, and that is a small blessing. But the fact that there are blessings on this table should be the focus, not that one is bigger than the other.
Yeah.
So if this goes away, then all of a sudden you feel like you've lost everything,
Yeah.
but you still have something on
Yeah.
the table. And one thing my grandmother always taught me is that whatever you crying about, someone else is praying to God for.
Yeah.
So if you complaining about your wife, there's someone praying to God for a wife. If you're complaining about your child, someone's praying to God for a child. And if you're complaining about whatever you're eating, someone's praying to God just to have that
Yeah.
on their dinner table. So always be grateful for what you have, be grateful for where you are, and just trust God and through whatever is going on
Keep
in your
believing,
life, man.
keep trusting. The season, this will pass. Like, this is not the end. Keep going. The season will pass.
You can lose the battle, but you can still win the war.
That's it.
Peace and love.